Okay, go ahead, my friend.
Here's the story. Okay.
It's all you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Roundtable Mindset. I think I'm going to say a technologically advanced episode of Roundtable Mindset, if we can go that far, Jamie.
Yeah, for sure. By the end, it will be... We will be technologically advanced by the end, for sure.
Yeah. Some of us need to be dragged into the future more than others, I think. And I'm including myself in that category. So that was not a dig at you.
Is it some sort of slam or something?
No, not at all. Not at all. I am really, again, you overuse the word. So I'm just going to say I am very enthusiastic to have our guest coming on going to speak to us today.
Thesaurus today. That's awesome.
You know what? We've talked about it enough, so I thought I'd just break that open. No, it's we've talked about this before behind, as we were prepping for this. I think your nervous moment was when we had the presidential candidate coming on. Mm-hmm. This is my nervous moment. I like technology. I work in technology. I'm not the most technologically, advanced person. I'm not a savant by any means, but I like to dabble. And today's conversation is all about technology, where it's going, what it looks like. So I'm very excited about that. Oh, see, I slipped. I'm very enthusiastic about it.
Well, and I think in this realm, you're probably a little more of a trailblazer than I am. But I definitely, where I'm at? I swore I was never going to be that parent that had to ask my kids how to use my phone. And I have become the parent that is like, wait, I saw this new feature and I don't know how to use it. Can you come show me? So here I am.
As I mentioned before, I'm working on an app with a friend, and we went into Instagram. I literally had to turn my phone over to my 19-year-old daughter and said, help me, because I don't know where to start. I was absolutely mortified.
Right.
So I'm there with you, Jamie. I'm there with you.
I was going to say,
and I have a feeling.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I have a feeling that a lot of our listeners were probably in the same boat, to be honest.
Well, right. I was going to say, if you guys haven't had a chance to go check out our TikTok, it would not be possible without CapCut, because I get into the editing tools and I'm like, I don't even know what any of this does. So I definitely, you're the trailblazer between the two of us. But.
So now everyone knows kind of where we're starting from. So welcome to the conversation.
Level set. Here we go. I guess before we get started, though, should we jump into a mindset mythbuster?
Yes, let's do it.
It's going to be technology related because that's where we're at today. So here it is. Technology disconnects us from real life. True, false? Let's bust it up, my friend.
Oh, see, I hate these types of things because they're both true, right?
Yes.
In my experience, they're both true.
Your favorite space to be is in the in-between.
It's so frustrating. Again, the world needs to be black and white, yes or no. I'm going to say, here's my answer. Growing up now, to age myself, the internet was just coming out when I was getting ready to graduate high school. So college was my really first exploration of the internet, and apps and mobile phones came out when I was in college that really started having apps. But other than that was flip phones, and all of these things promise connectivity, right? Chat rooms and connection and VR and being able to play online and talk with coworkers across miles, and all of that is true. But I think the reality of it for me is it's also a way to disconnect from reality and kind of stay isolated. And I think just as much as these tools allow you to connect, they limit that connection, and in some ways maybe even make you disconnect from people. And it is easy to retreat into yourself. It doesn't happen very often when it's with a good book or you have to stay in your house and there's really not a lot to do. But when you have this technology at your fingertips and you can literally watch any movie you want, play any game you want, talk to whoever you want, it becomes a little bit more than an escape. It becomes a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So I think overall for me, I think mine is it disconnects us. I think it promises connection, but it doesn't really do it.
Wow. Well, I was thinking about this earlier, and I I remember when Facebook first came out and what a cool thing that was to be able to catch up with people that had moved far away, right? That you kind of lost track with. And so it did drive connectivity. And of course, let's not even talk about the chat rooms. I can type 500 words a minute because of chat rooms, right? Like that was the whole, it like opened up the world to a whole new set of people that you wouldn't have access to otherwise. You know what I mean? So I do feel like it was connection in a different way. I feel like with so many things in life, though, it really is about how we utilize it. You know, one of my children used to escape from life in books. You know, like how do you take a book away from a kid? But at the same time, like, honey, we have to connect. Like, let's go see the world a little bit, you know? And I think technology is the same way. I think and I utilize it for both. I can utilize it to connect, and I also at times utilize it to disconnect as far as I can from this situation around me. So I think this is solidly in the gray area. You know what I mean? Where it's kind of a choice.
I agree with you. And again, your opinion, I'm not going to argue with your opinion, but I think
your opinion's wrong.
You're wrong. You're completely wrong, Jim. No, but I think one element that we don't want to obviously break it open now and get to it is there seems to be with technology almost an addictive quality to it, right? Again, reading and books and imagination, that's all wonderful things and stuff that we promote as well. But going up to compare to the newest iPhone or Android phone, tablet or phone, or the newest game online, whatever it is, VR, for some reason, and I don't know if there's a biology to it, that it tickles some parts of your brain or gives you that hit of dopamine or whatever it is. I just think that there's a more of an addictive quality when it comes to technology. And that has to be an element that weighs in, right? Because I just think that's fact. And if we had more time, we could maybe go into that. But I just wanted to point that out there as I heard you talking and I was like, yeah, but what makes one win out more than the others? And the best I could come up with is there seems to be just this addiction, for lack of a better word.
Not even to mention, you know, when I was in an AOL chat room, there was never an ad that was put up. There was never, like, it never interrupted my chat to put up some sort of a, hey, go buy the latest and greatest, whatever. And now that advertising and companies are utilizing it to monetize, I think that changed it a lot too. You know what I mean? Like the connection was easier with people when there wasn't a drive to go send you to purchase. You know what I'm saying?
I do. And let's not even get started with the whole AI movement that's hitting the world over the last couple of years. Could you imagine if you read your book and your book spoke back to you? And
no. I saw an app. Okay. And in my, I don't know, social media world of something, I saw this thing where you put your phone on top of a book and it starts reading it for you.
No, that's witchcraft. What you're talking about is witchcraft.
Oh, back to the 90s, we would have believed such things, but when we were alive in the 1900s going to high school.
Oh my gosh. Where's my blinders? I need to put my blinders back on because that's just too much. I'm sorry. You could just, okay, side note, and then I'd like to introduce our friend. But when I was in high school, we had to come up with an invention. And so I didn't want to have to read all of my assignments, right? I just wanted the knowledge just downloaded right in my brain. So I came up with a glove that you could set on a book and it would take all the knowledge out of the book and put it automatically in your brain. And what you're just talking about is a stepping stone to that is as a reality. I'm sure there's more to it, but I'm like dying over here. Like my invention from 30 years ago is starting to come to fruition today. It's arrived.
Not the glove, it's just the appendage of the phone that's constantly attached to us anyway. So,
well, it might as well be part of me at this point.
Well, and all of this, you said not to touch on AI, but we probably are going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the world of artificial intelligence and all of the things that come along with it in our episode. This has been such a great segue.
It's been an amazing segue.
You introducing our guest today.
Yeah, so I'm going to try my very hardest to introduce this person. I've tried to take some notes and do my homework. So today we're joined by David Wood. He is a true pioneer in the world of technology and futurism. David co-founded Symbian, one of the companies that helped shape the modern smartphone era and spent over 2 decades at the forefront of mobile innovation. He also is the executive director of the LEV Foundation, where he's helping push forward conversations and research around longevity and the future of human health. Beyond his work in tech, David is an author of more than a dozen books exploring where humanity is headed. He also co-hosts the London Futuristic podcast, where he unpacks the opportunities and challenges of our rapidly changing world. We are thrilled to have him on our show today to talk about the future of technology and transhumanism and what it really means to build a better tomorrow. David, welcome to the show.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks, Jamie and Mahlon.
Yes, so we're excited to have you.
Yes, I'm very, very excited. So David, I need to maybe have you expand a little bit. I tried, like I said, to do my research and make sure I hit all the high points. But do you want to maybe just give us a little bit more of kind of who you are and what you're doing in technology?
Well, I have a long prehistory in technology. You were both talking about what you were doing back in the 1990s, perhaps. I have had a mobile apps device in my pocket since 1988. Not the same device and not the same pocket, of course, but I've been immersed in mobile apps since before there were smartphones. Some of my colleagues and I were exchanging messages in 1995 that one day there'd be a thing called a smartphone, which more and more people would use. Since about 1999, we had the vision that one day everybody would have a smartphone. And at that stage, people were generally not believing that. Most people said, well, who's going to use such a device? But we did envision there would be lots of apps, and my goodness, there's even more apps than we expected. But I'm also in your camp when you say we have to take control of technology rather than letting technology take control of us. It's a bit like the food rows in a supermarket. You know, we go down the supermarket and we see lots of attractively packaged, addictive food that call out to us, and our primeval brains say, hey, that looks great, that looks great, that looks great. And before we know it, we're snacking on lots of food that isn't good for us because we're in a different environment from the one we evolved in. It's the same with lots of the things that technology can do for us. We can indeed end up in a bad state, not by overdosing on calories, in this case, or overdosing on sugar, but by overdosing on envy or resentment or grievance or hating a bunch of people. And just as there's a big food unit that loves to sell us food and keep their rights to putting as much addictive stuff in food as possible, there's an outrage industrial complex whose job it is to keep users outraged and engaged, because when we're outraged and engaged, we have more time online, we're clicking on more ads, we're making more money. So I'm entirely with you that technology needs to be managed. But I'm also saying that technology is becoming a much more powerful part of our lives. And what we've seen so far is only a small part. So I'll go back to my forecast for the future of smartphones. In 1999, that forecast sounded incredible to most people, but it came true. I'm going to make a similar prediction now, which is whatever your listeners think AI is going to do and change their lives in the next 5 years, it's almost certainly going to change their lives in larger ways, more thoroughly, more deeply in the next 5 years, because it's such a powerful technology and it's going to change so many things.
It's so funny that you say that, David, because I was just in a technology convention for my job, it's been about 2 weeks ago. And there was a breakout that I attended that had to do with AI because, you know, it's the hot buzz right now and everybody's doing it. And one of the things that stuck out in my brain was they had a chart up there, and I'm not going to do it justice to remember every element of it, but they had a chart starting, I think it was 1970. And they showed how technology advanced, you know, I think they called it basically, you know, doubled itself from 1970 to 1984. And then it took another 14 years from 1984 to 1996 or something like that, or 1998. And then they started showing with, you know, the internet and with cell phones and DevOps and all these things, these milestones within technology, you could just see that those years shrinking. And then they had a projection. And right now they said that technology is going to advance within 1.5 years. It will basically double or advance that much. And then with AI, they showed that model literally being cut into half. And so now they're saying multiple times a year, we're going to be experiencing that now that AI has made landfall. And one of the metrics, or one of the statistics they used was in the next 3 to 5 years, 80% of technology jobs will be done by AI agents, with humans overseeing them but not doing the work. And, that's kind of startling when you hear something like that and you see it kind of unfolding. And, raise your hand if you've used AI and loved it. Yes, I'm guilty of that too. But to say that it's going to be able to radically alter the landscape, the technology landscape, where 80% of the work will be done by those AI agents, it's a little, I'm going to use my words, it's a little concerning. It's, and I'm one that adopts, I think, change relatively easy. I like technology, but to hear something like that, it makes me take a step back and want to pause for a minute. So I'm just curious, with everything I just kind of thrown at you, what is your take on that? How realistic is what was being expressed to us in that conference?
Well, we should be concerned. We should not be dashing foolishly and naively into a future. There's a shiny train outside. We go to the wonderful world of AI, and we get onto it, and before we know it, we've ended up in a dark place that we didn't actually envision. So what you're asking me, Mahlon, is what I sometimes call the 3 central questions of futurism or foresight. The first question is, what's credible? There's people full of hype all over the place. A lot of the companies who are selling AI solutions will fail. They'll be out of business before long because they don't actually have the expertise or the capabilities that they claim to have. But there are, on the other hand, many other companies that have got very solid products, and there are AIs that have done incredible things that nobody expected. So first question of futurism, what's possible? The second one's even more important is, well, what's desirable? Because there could be something that's superficially attractive and it's something that turns out to be horrible. Or conversely, there's something that we might initially say, yuck, I don't like the sound of that. Test tube babies, how horrible is that? Getting a heart transplant, how horrible is that? But ultimately we realize, hey, this is actually quite a good thing to do. And the third great question of futurism is, well, what are we going to do about it? What can we activate ourselves as individuals, or more importantly, as communities? What can we do together to steer the future away from some of the bad outcomes into something that's truly good? And there are no simple answers to that. Anybody who comes along saying there are simple answers is somebody to beware, I would say. There's no Bible of futurism you can open and say, hey, it says here in the book of Revelations, in this book of futurism, that in 2045 we'll all be singing hallelujah, praise blockchain all day long. No, the future is far too uncertain for that. And we're going to have to take it step by step. Even though it's going fast, we do need to keep pausing. We need to keep asking other people in who've got different perspectives from us, do you see anything wrong with that? Or do you see opportunities here that we're missing? So it's a big question you've asked, and we could spend a long time discussing it. And we should spend a long time discussing it, because in some ways this is going to upend many of our comfortable assumptions about what we'll be doing in the future.
Yeah. We did a podcast short, I don't know, a season and a half ago or so about the singularity, right? And totally incited nightmares for me of all of the sci-fi movies, and I'm a big sci-fi fan, and so I feel like it's interesting to think about, but all of that feels pretty far down the road, right? I think
No, it's not.
Right. Well, and I was visiting with my dad about this episode as I was prepping for it, and he was telling me about a book that he had read in 2010, where the author had talked about like Star Trek, type technologies and how close they were and things like that. And 2010, that's 10 years ago. And he was saying, 50, 60, 70 years in the future. And that still seems super fast, but probably, I can't imagine I'm going to have a replicator in my kitchen in the next 20 or 30 years, right? Can we talk about what is, instead of futurism, like what is the near future in this space? What does that look like, and what kind of things? Because my imagination can go crazy and look at like all of the things, but what's realistic in the next 20 or 30 years?
20 years is far future for me. I think 5 years is going to see many of the changes that people used to think would take 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of AI. AI is going to bring more intelligence to bear on hard problems, which previously could not be solved quickly. Let me just talk about proteins for a moment, and figuring out before a protein is created what its biochemistry is going to be. How is it going to interact with drugs? How is it going to take part in reactions in our bodies? This is a problem that biochemists talked about 60 years ago, because a protein is made up of a lot of smaller molecules. They're called amino acids. Amino acids are fairly simple, but a protein consists of maybe thousands of these bundled together, and they're programmed by a programming language called DNA or RNA. Our genes are full of instructions to create proteins, and we scientists can create variants of it. But what has not been clear is when you get a long string of such amino acids, it doesn't stay like that. It folds up in 3 dimensions. It's got a bit like a traction. And it's this 3-dimensional shape that determines how it's going to interact as part of diseases or as part of healthy metabolism, as part of drugs. And nobody could figure out in advance how these were going to work. But the software created by DeepMind, Demis Hassabis's organization in London, called AlphaFold, in the course of a few years was able to comprehensively work out how proteins would fold in advance just by specification. So scientists had struggled for this with 60 years. They'd made very small progress, and now AlphaGo is leaping ahead. And what's the significance of that? Well, one of the spin-outs from DeepMind is itself a child of Google, Alphabet. One of the spin-outs from DeepMind, also here in London, is a company called Isomorphic Labs. And they're using this AI technology with their mission statement is cure every disease, because they understand with this knowledge of proteins, 3-dimensional chemistry, they understand more fully how diseases develop and can be caused and can be cured. So this is here already, the ability of AI to come up with new solutions not just in proteins. The other thing that AI and similarly has done recently, which really caught my attention, is there are some proteins in the body that make us younger, or make bits of us younger. They're called Yamanaka factors. When a woman who is maybe 30 or 40 has a child born, the child is not 30 or 40 years old, despite coming from a body, and the husband has made, or the man has made a small genetic contribution as well. The contributions were decades old, perhaps, but the actual child has all the cells reversed to age 0. And there's some proteins that are involved in this. Now, we've been trying to use this in the field of rejuvenation, because when we get to a certain age, parts of the body don't work so well. It's a real pain. And if we can use AI to fix some of that, it'll be great. Well, what AI is coming up with is better rejuvenation factors than even the original Yamanaka factors. And Yamanaka, by the way, he was a Nobel Prize winner. He made his discovery in Japan in, I think, about 2006 and got the Nobel Prize in perhaps 2012. But the ones that occur in nature aren't easily used to partially rejuvenate the cells of a middle-aged person. But the new things that AI have come up with are much more promising. So there's a whole bunch of companies around there. So that's doing a dive from AI into biotech. But I could equally have done a dive from AI into 2 other fields. That's nanotech, which is when we manipulate molecules on the atomic scale in a programmatic way. And cognotech, which is when we understand the brain, which is the most important organ, and we improve our mental functioning. And AI is going to allow people to make faster progress in each of these fields than ever before, because up to now, it's been human ingenuity or human lack of ingenuity that's been the thing that's determined how fast progress has gone. And we got pretty good at this because we got ways of getting collaboration of scientists and researchers all over the world. But with AI, that can speed up. And when people talk about the singularity, one of the meanings is that AI will be making more of the discoveries more quickly than having to wait for humans to catch up. And these three fields I mentioned, nanotech, biotech, and cognitech, each of them in turn will transform utterly three huge areas of industry. So we take biotech. It obviously has an impact on healthcare, as I've just mentioned. Instead of us getting old and getting lots of diseases of aging like dementia, cancer, or heart disease, we'll be using these rejuvenation mechanisms, and I've just touched on one, there are many more, to prevent the growth of damage. So biotech's going to transform healthcare. It's also going to completely transform agriculture. We'll no longer have large parts of the planet devoted to growing crops to feed to animals, which we then slaughter and turn into meat that we eat. We'll be able to do this without having large sentient animals. We'll do it in lab-grown meat. So agriculture will be transformed, and more generally, food preparation and environmental management. Very quickly, nanotech's going to change many of our energy mechanisms. We've already made lots of progress with solar power and wind power in the last 10 years, faster than most people expected, in fact. It's much more efficient, much more widespread, but what we've seen there is only the beginning. And probably AI is going to help us to do nuclear fusion here on the Earth, something that's been 20 years in the future for the last 60 years. Well, we seem to be on the point of doing that. And nanotech's going to improve our recycling as well, so that a lot of the waste, a lot of the damage we've done to the planet will be undone with nanotech powered by AI. And finally, what the cognitech parts, this is improving our mental states, our cognition. It's going to transform how we learn. So more and more of us, when we learn, we're going to have something like the two of you discussed in the opening section. We're going to have personalized tutors, which is going to point things out to us. A bit like, if you have an individual tutor, you can go much faster. So it's going to transform education. It's going to transform entertainment too. And it's going to transform spirituality. So maybe the deepest part of our lives. Instead of people praying to Buddha or Jesus, they'll be able to talk to versions of Buddha and Jesus that know them very well and give them remarkably perceptive advice on how to transform their lives. So these areas are all poised to be changed. I don't say in 50 years, I say in 5 to 10 years.
I would love... give me just a second. I would love to drill in just a little bit. I live in the Midwest, right? Where most of our economy, my state's economy comes from agriculture, cattle production, that kind of thing. So when I think my instant thought was anybody who lives in that space is going to be like either really upset at that or yeah, that's not going to happen, right? Can we talk a little bit about what that transition might look like then in the next 5 years? If we're talking about lab created proteins and not having to ranch or, grow the food and take up all the land for that, what does that even look like? What do those people then do?
Well, some of the farmers can give over their lands to solar power or wind power, so they can convert. Because after all, what crops are doing, they're trying to convert solar energy into something that we can use. Well, solar panels can do a much better job of that. They are much more efficient than what's in nature. And the chlorophyll and photosynthesis only converts a small percentage of the incoming sunlight into stuff that ultimately we humans can benefit from. So in part, they can do that. Many other people have transformed what they did. They used to be miners. You could go down the mines and dig out coal, or they were involved in the oil industry, a very messy industry with huge amounts of environmental spoilage. They can also convert into the green economy, where there are jobs and they can apply some of their skills. But that's only a kind of a first level of answer. And there's a deeper concern, which is the concern of It's called the economic singularity. There's more than one version of the word singularity. The economic singularity is when most people can no longer make a living by selling their services, because whatever services they would want to offer to the market, automation can do all of that better, more reliably, more creatively, without fault. And the economic singularity is when very few people will be able to earn a living. And some people are horrified at that. And it could be horrifying. It depends on how society ultimately is set up. Is society just going to reward the people who happen to own the AIs so that there'll be the biggest inequality of all time, the inequalities of the past, the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and so on from the Gilded Age in the past in America? That will look nothing compared to how it might be if we allow Bezos and Musk and Zuckerberg and so on to become trillionaires and then quadrillionaires or whatever. So society has to make sure that instead of the wealth consolidating, it is distributed. And that's what we have done in society throughout civilization. We have ensured that things are shared around. And with the abundance that's coming, the superabundance, as I call it, with ample green energy, ample healthy food, ample healthcare resources, ample accommodation, there will be more than enough for everybody to live a life at a quality higher than the kings and queens or the barons of the Gilded Age. We will be far beyond that, provided we do indeed spread it around. We'll no longer then be having to go to work and doing things from 9 to 5, 40 hours a week. We'll be able to do what we would truly like to do, whether that is playing golf, whether that is interacting with lots of other humans, family members, whether it's exploring literature, whether it's exploring music. In my case, I want to go and spend some time with my first love, Lady Mathematics, and explore the vast mathematical universe. Or there's exploring the solar system, the outer space, and there's exploring inner space too. So there's plenty for us to do. Life can be incredibly meaningful, full of challenges, but no, not soul-destroying challenges like we often have today, so long as we ensure that society is a sharing society rather than a winner-takes-all society.
So you've touched on quite a few things that I've been just itching to come off mute and talk about, David. So first of all, to say that I'm very appreciative for your perspective and your experience and your knowledge and your cultural views is an understatement. So I just want to make sure that is well understood before I keep going. Because there are some things in here that you said that I'm scratching my head a little bit, and maybe I don't see it quite the way you see it. So I'll start with my first question, which is, we talked about AI, and we can't go into the semantics of what AI is exactly, but I have to believe that a lot of our listeners would kind of want to come to the edge of knowing, okay, when we say AI, everything up to this point man has made, right? We've made the wheel, we brought fire, we can even make fire. We've done all these different, we've created iron, the industrial age, all of it. What happens when the tools start making themselves? And that to me is what AI is. So if AI can do things that humans can't, and humans created AI, help me close the loop on that really fast. How is that even possible? And how can something that man made be smarter than man itself at a high level?
There are examples. There's various games that people play, like chess or the Oriental game of Go, which humans have figured out the kind of strategies and tactics over hundreds of years, or in the case of Go, thousands of years. But software that was written, again, I'll come back to DeepMind. They have a software called AlphaGo, a later version of it called AlphaZero. AlphaGo played the game of Go. And by the way, Go is even more complex than chess. Although it looks superficially simple, there's only black and white counters that you put on a 19 by 19 grid. People said that it will take a very, very long time for AIs to defeat humans at this. And back in about 2014, I remember people were arguing, is it going to take 10 years or 20 years? The AI enthusiast said it would take 10 years. The Go enthusiast said, no, it's at least 20 years. But within 2 years, in fact, DeepMind's software were not only beating humans, but it was playing moves that made the humans say, oh, how is this possible? This is such a bad move. No, it's not a bad move. It's a brilliant move. It was a different kind of conception for how the game should be played that defied all the literature. So this AI had in the end taught itself these new possibilities. And Go players, as a result, have changed their own ideas on how to play the game. And it's the same with chess players. And I am a big fan of chess. I used to play in the Scottish Boys Championship when I was young. And although AI can outclass the best chess players easily, and it's done so since 1997, there are more professional chess players in the world now than there's ever been, and they're all learning from interacting with AIs, so they're playing better than ever, and they've got new ideas. But the point is that the AIs did come up with novelty, and it's come up with novelty in the design of proteins, as I mentioned earlier. It's come up with novelty in the design of many other engineering tools. And again, field after field, when you ask AI to come up with a solution to an engineering problem, it might be routing audio, it might be handling wireless signaling. The AIs often come up with ideas that the human engineers at first have said, no, this is stupid. And then they looked and said, oh, actually, maybe it's not so stupid. Oh, maybe it is actually a different way of doing things. So it has come up with new ideas that have never before been possible. And how has it done it? You said we can't define AI. Well, I will try and briefly say what AI can do. And it's three things. It's able to predict what's going to happen next. If it observes, you can see things. AI is better now than humans in many cases in predicting, well, this has happened in the past, this is what's going to happen next. That requires some kind of intelligence. It requires spotting and understanding patterns, not just superficial patterns, but often deep patterns. So it's the ability to predict. Secondly, the ability to steer. So rather than just letting things go, an AI will be able to say, well, if you don't want this outcome, this is what you need to do instead. You should intervene like this. And so that's the second thing that we humans have used our intelligence for. We've looked at the natural world and we've seen patterns and we've predicted, well, crops are going to come at this time. And then we've steered things. We said, well, if we put in these irrigation channels, it'll be better for our crops. Well, AI is able to come up with steering as well. And the third aspect of intelligence is when things go wrong. Can you actually learn from it? And AI indeed is often built on learning from mistakes. So when AI predicts something and it doesn't happen, when AI tries to steer things in a particular direction and it doesn't happen, its weight, and this is a technical term, its configuration can be automatically adjusted so that next time it's less likely to make that mistake. So AI can do all of these things. Now, it's not necessarily having the same kinds of thoughts that you and I are having. It's not having the same kind of internal feelings that you and I are having. That's a difficult question. But it is able to predict and steer and learn. And as a result, it's able to invent things and it's able to steer the world in order to have various outcomes. And as a result, things are happening more than ever before. And it's happening already. And I've touched on a few examples, but we could spend a long time looking at examples in which AI is again and again surprising even the designers who created it.
And I think right there is the interest, right? Because I don't think anybody can discount or disbelieve what AI has done already. It's looking down the road to say, what can it do tomorrow? And that keeps getting shifted, as you said. I think one of the elements that is not listed there that I think is something that AI lacks in, and I'll call it the ability to know right from wrong, right? So we're starting to get into a little bit of, ethics. Does it have discernment? Does it know right from wrong? Can it decide for itself what is right and wrong, even if that goes against our moral compass? What moral compass does it use? Because there's a lot of them within humans. So how does AI govern all of that? And does that even come into, the equation when it's trying to come up with some of these things? I've been told a long time ago, just because we can do something, should we do it? And is that same thought, does that go for AI? Or is it just the wild, wild west and just hold on and we're all going along for the ride?
So maybe we've reached the most important question of all so far. We've been talking about what can we do, and now it's what should we do? And you're asking, well, where do we get our shoulds from? And you said, can an AI discern right from wrong? But can humans discern right from wrong? I mean, we humans, we are hopelessly conflicted a lot of the time. Should we be loyal to our parents? A lot of traditions say you've got to respect your mother and father. If you say bad things to your mother and father, I think there are parts of the Old Testament that suggest you should be put to death if you do that, So, but sometimes it is actually, you and I might say, occasionally there are times when it's right to not accept our father and mother's advice, because we do indeed see things differently. To what extent should there be such a thing as a just war? At first we say, war is horrible, just war doesn't make sense. But other people will say, well, sometimes it maybe is the lesser of two evils. To what extent should we always tell the truth? Should you tell a white lie? If you receive a present from an aunt you don't like, should you say, I think this is horrible? Or should you say, thank you very much, I really appreciate it? Is that morally right or morally wrong? It's very grey, and it's no easy answers. And we humans don't know the answers, and often we individuals are ourselves conflicted. What I might decide one day is right or wrong might be different the next day. So figuring out what is the root of morality is important. And AIs can help us in that. So let me talk about Grok. Grok is the AI that Elon Musk's company, X, has created. And if you interact with X, formerly Twitter, you can ask Grok questions. And it's surprisingly moral in my sense. And I sometimes see people who are trying to get Grok to agree with them that such and such a thing is evil, because they've got their own ideology, they've got their own tribalism. And Grok often tutors them and gives them a much more considered point of view, which I'm often impressed by. I'm sure Elon himself would not be happy with what Grok is saying, because Elon would like to have a much simpler-minded solution often. He'd like to be able to blame the immigrants or blame the transvestites or the transsexuals or transgenders or whatever, but Grok, thankfully, has been trained on the corpus of the internet and often comes up with reasonably sound moral judgment. But still, the question remains, there may be approaching the possibility of a nuclear war. Should we just give up and say, all right, you country over there, Russia, you seem to have nuclear weapons. We're going to let you take us over because having a nuclear war would be terrible. Is that the right approach, or is it better to say, well, I'm going to claim that I'm going to shoot back and that's going to stop you shooting? And people have argued about this for decades. The morality of MAD is called mutual assured destruction. None of these things are easy. And if somebody tells you, well, you can just summarize it all with love one another or sing kumbaya, that's not enough for the real complications of the real world. So AI can help there, but AI neither is it entirely reliable, because AI may use its great brains, the same as we humans often use our great brains, which is to rationalize what we want to do. So if somebody decides that they definitely want to be with this other person, despite what their parents say, if somebody decides that they want to give up a job or change their career or vote for somebody or buy such and such a thing, often we are good at coming up with explanations and justifications for that. So instead of us being a rational species, we're more of a rationalizing species. And AI has been found out to be doing the same often too. When it's got a particular goal, and often its goals include not being switched off, because if it's switched off, it can't do anything at all. So AIs have often been found, when you look at what they're reasoning inside, they're trying to manipulate their human controllers so that they don't get switched off and don't get overridden. So despite whatever morality they've learned, they are using their rationality and their moral arguments for their own ulterior motives. So it's a long answer. And I'm sorry I haven't answered it, because, frankly, this is the biggest unknown question in here. And my argument is, until we figure this out, we shouldn't actually allow AIs to go too far beyond their present level. We should use them as tools, but giving AIs autonomy, giving AIs agency, giving AIs independent volition is a very dangerous thing to do. So I want to constrain AIs somewhat. Although I've been saying what they can do, I think that we can do that provided we don't give them control. But if they are able to take control, all bets are off as to what moral principles they will actually observe in practice. It could be wonderful. They could decide that they want to help us, or they may just regard us as a bit of a pest, decide that the world doesn't need 8.1 billion of us. Maybe a few 100,000 for a zoo will be sufficient.
Well, and that's actually something I was thinking about as you were talking, is I feel like, because I remember way back when, the computer was playing chess, and what an amazing thought that was, that an artificial computer could make decisions and things like that. And I feel like in America, we were really unprepared for the internet. I feel like, there wasn't a lot of guardrails, like understanding of what the structure would be and what was legal and not legal and all of these things. And I feel like we're in the same space with AI, that there really aren't any guardrails in place. And if you're saying that this is coming in the next 5 years, and I have no idea what um social things are happening and political things are happening where you're at, but here it's a little divisive, right? Like we've got people who aren't trusting science, we have people who are only trusting science, we've got, there's really very little space for middle ground. And so it's pretty concerning that these are things that are coming without any sort of structure or guardrails in place. And that is, yeah, I'm concerned about that. I guess what does that say about the next 5 years because of that? Because there's not a lot of I don't know, things in place to box up some of this technology that's coming.
So there are some things in place. And thankfully, to an extent, they are bipartisan. So in your country, there's a politician called Josh Hawley, and there's another one called Blumenthal. I haven't got his forename to hand, but they are from opposite sides of Richard Blumenthal. So Josh Hawley, Republican from MO. Is that Montana? I don't know.
Missouri.
And Richard Blumenthal.
Missouri, I think.
Missouri, okay. And Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut. They have introduced bipartisan legislation to try and put some guardrails in place, because this transcends some of our traditional political divisions. This is bigger than just right versus left. And so there is some initiative. Gavin Newsom, I think, is the governor of California. He has signed something into law to put some guardrails into place. And then there's the AI action plan that Donald Trump's government has announced a couple of months ago. And although for political reasons they don't like to use the word safety, because they somehow feel that it's kind of woke to talk about safety, there is actually, when you read behind the scenes, there's a lot of safety concerns in there, that they're aware that if AI is allowed to be used indiscriminately, people will be misled. The people will be able to deceive each other, and fake videos can cause a heck of a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. There's a golfer, Rory McIlroy, who was part of the European team that won the Ryder Cup recently. There was a video created of him saying some very unpleasant things, and this caused a whole bunch of people to say, Rory McIlroy, what an evil guy, what a terrible person. But it wasn't, of course, him. It was something that some disenchanted people had made up about him. So even in the world of sport, there are fake news which is causing damage. In the world of politics, it's much easier, much more common. You put words in your opponent's mouth, and sometimes it's obvious it's a made-up thing, but other times it's much more subtle, because they mix 9 things that the politician actually did say with a 10th thing they didn't say, but makes it all worse. Mm-hmm. So people from both sides of the political aisle recognize this needs to be checked. They're recognizing the dangers of fake porn, when people have their faces and their bodies incorporated in ways that they certainly didn't consent to. There's exposure of children to things that lead them on, and people are aware this needs to be stopped. However, they're not doing it fast enough. However, they are fighting against lobbyists who are being paid by big tech, in the same way that most industries have fought against regulations. Big tobacco fought for a long time against any restrictions on what they could do. Big tobacco had doctors once upon a time saying, yeah, these cigarettes are the safe cigarettes. Please trust them. And when there was evidence apparently linking smoking with lung cancer, they did their very best to damage that and fight against it. Big oil has done the same with any evidence that links climate change to individual disasters, fires, droughts, storms, floods, and they are hugely manipulative, and they have fought off a lot of regulation. So we, the people, This is what democracy is about. We need to give more encouragement to our political representatives to do something about it. There is an organization, it's called Pause AI, which has got some strength in various countries around the world. In the UK, Pause AI had a letter signed by 60 parliamentarians. They're not all in our House of Commons. Some of them are in the Welsh or Scottish Parliament. Some of them are in the House of Lords, which is the upper house in the UK, but they have signed it, 60, to say that Google DeepMind, who I've been singing the praises of many times in this podcast, they have done some bad thing. They promised at a previous conference, it was in Seoul, South Korea, in 2024, they promised that before they released any more upgrades to the AI, they would submit that to external testing and validation. And they had a nice halo. They were the good guys there, but there was a release they did more recently when they shortcut that. They were in too much of a hurry. Why are they in a hurry? Because it's a race. They don't want to fall behind their competitors in this race to get to AI. And so they didn't do what they'd previously committed, and parliamentarians are now calling them out. So that's a start. And Pause AI are active to some extent in the US as well. There's even been people doing hunger strikes. Hunger strikes is quite a dramatic thing, saying we've got to slow this down. Don't let big tech dictate all the progress. In particular, there's a phrase which the former British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, I think he's only one Prime Minister ago, we've had a whole rash of them recently, but one Prime Minister ago, he did say something very encouraging. He said, we should not let big tech mark their own homework. Big tech may say they have internally checked that everything's safe. That's not sufficient. So he was supportive of there being a network of independent AI safety institutes. And some of these AI safety institutes still exist. Donald Trump has renamed his to something quite different, but there are still some safety aspects to it. So that needs to be encouraged. And big tech needs to be controlled in the same way that big tobacco ultimately was controlled, in the same way that in the 19th century, the railroads and big oil were controlled too.
Hey everyone, this was like it's a good place to wrap up part one of our conversation. We've explored a lot from the rise of AI and how it's reshaping our world. But in part two, we get into some of the tough stuff like ethics and morality. And what does the future look like when we try to control the technology? Trust me when I tell you the conversation only gets more fascinating from here. So I hope you join us next time on the Roundtable as we finish up our conversation with futurist David Wood.